Welcome to Trademark Property Solutions Employee Training, featuring safety and company operations. In the first training session, we will cover an introduction to trademark, which will include about trademark, our divisions, company benefits, and our core values. In the second session, we will cover trademark standards and operations, which will include probationary period, time cards and job tracking, required tools, chauffeur's license and DOT medical exam, communication board, requesting time off, drug-free workplace, company uniforms, credit card policy, and scanning receipts. In the third session, we will cover OSHA construction safety, which will include falls in roofing, falls in floor openings, falls on scaffolding, fall protection, back over accidents, carbon monoxide, respiratory protection, sprains and strains, asbestos awareness, electrical safety, chemical labeling, and material safety data sheets. In the final session, we will discuss fleet safety and maintenance, which will include vehicle safety, including distracted driving, winter driving, and wet road driving, fuel efficiency, which will cover an overview, vehicle maintenance, change how you drive, and gas saving extras, and vehicle maintenance, which will cover tire maintenance, exterior appearance, interior appearance, engine oil, transmission fluid, power steering fluid, and coolant. Introduction. Trademark was founded in 2003 by Matt Blachok. Most services are provided in-house, by our experienced staff members, who specialize and are licensed in many trades. We work with many local and international investors to purchase, rehabilitate, manage and maintenance their investment portfolios. We work with banks, brokers, insurance companies, regional and national mortgage service companies, and government agencies to get foreclosed homes back to marketable condition. We also manage condominium and homeowners associations. Those services include property management, pool maintenance, snow removal and groundskeeping. We pride ourselves on being a one-stop shop. Trademark works in 4 separate divisions, which include construction, real estate, property management, and field services. All employees must work together as a team, and support each division, when necessary. Company benefits are available to all full-time, permanent employees. We offer health, dental, vision, 401k, and paid vacation. Our core values. We strive to be a company known for leadership. A company where employees are proud to work. A company in which clients, business partners, contractors and suppliers enjoy working with. We gain trust by treating people with integrity, respect, and fairness. Standards and operations. Probationary period. During your first 90 days at Trademark, you are expected to learn the following: Trademark standards and expectations, our clients' standards, fleet safety, truck organization, photo process, power tool safety, OSHA standards and safety, fleet maintenance, trademark software, job time tracking, and learn some skilled trades. After 90 days of employment at Trademark, you will receive a performance review, which will cover job knowledge, work quality, attendance and punctuality, initiative, communication and listening, respect for others, and contribution to business strategy. If you do not feel that you are receiving proper training by your supervisor, please see Matt Blachok. Time cards and job tracking. Trademark pays minimum wage for shop and drive time to the job, for all service crews and from the job, for drivers only. Time and a half is paid on total work and drive time combined. You must also subtract 30 minutes each day for lunch, if you've worked over 6 hours, and a 15-minute break, if you've only worked between 4 and 6 hours. Completing time cards. To complete your time card, you must first write in your name and the pay period. Write in the time that you arrive at the shop and the time that you arrive at your first job. Since your drive time ends, your job time begins, so carry your end time down to your job time. Once you leave the job, your work time ends. If you are the driver, you will get paid for your return drive. Your return drive will be carried over from job end time. If you are not the driver, you will not get paid for return drive time, so leave the return drive blank. Enter the time that you arrive back to the shop. Circle P for passenger or D for driver. Adding time cards. Add a cross to calculate your shop and drive time to your first job. Add a cross to calculate your job time. Do not forget to subtract your break. Add a cross to calculate your return drive time. At the end of the week, add all of your drive time and work time. Time card must be added up and turned in every Monday. Job tracking. Each day you must list all job names on the back of your time card. Payday is every Friday. Checks can be picked up after 5:30 p.m., and will be located next to the communication board. Required tools. All construction and field service employees must use their own hand tools when performing work in the field. These tools include a toolbox or tool bag, a hammer, assorted cutters, pliers, channel locks, wrenches, assorted screwdrivers and nut drivers, a utility knife, pencils, a tape measure, a level, and a cordless drill. Chauffeur's license and DOT, medical exam. Trademark requires that all construction and field service workers obtain a chauffeur's license and DOT medical exam, at their own expense, before beginning work in the field. A chauffeur's license is required in the state of Michigan to operate any fleet vehicle. You must be a Michigan resident with no violations, suspensions, or denials on your record. To apply, you may visit any Michigan Secretary of State office. Make sure you bring the following documentation: a valid Social Security number, birth certificate, proof of identity, such as a driver's license, proof of residency, and pay a $35 fee. A DOT medical exam must be performed to certify your chauffeur's license. Copies of your DOT medical card must be kept on file at Trademark, and kept in the fleet vehicle that you are driving. Communication board. The communication board is located in the hallway between the main office and the garage. This is used to communicate important information from the office to the field. It is your responsibility to check the board daily. On the communication board you will find schedules, company memos, client updates, and other important company information. The time cards are located on the right side of the board. And on the left side, you will find company forms and documents. We ask that you do not post in this area, or write on anything that has been posted. Requesting time off. Occasionally, you may need a day off. We do not guarantee time off, and it is determined by current workload, how much time you have previously requested off, and job performance. Time off must be requested at least 2 weeks in advance, by completing the time off request form, located next to the communication board. Once completed, the form must be turned into the file slot on the conference room door. Drug-free workplace. Trademark explicitly prohibits the use, distribution, sale, possession, manufacturing or dispensing of any illegal drugs in the workplace, worksite or in any company vehicle. It is a well-established fact that employees who use illegal drugs, on or off duty, tend to be less productive, less reliable, and prone to greater absenteeism, thereby impairing their ability to perform tasks that are critical to the company's focus. This results in the potential for accidents on duty, and failures that can pose serious threats to health, safety, and the protection of property. Illegal drug use is detrimental to the operations and functioning of Trademark's employees. Therefore, it is our policy to ensure a workplace that is free of illegal drugs, and to eliminate illegal drug use by all employees in the workplace. To achieve this policy and as a deterrence to illegal drug use, Trademark established a comprehensive drug prevention program which includes pre-hire, random, for-cause, and post-accident drug testing. This policy is provided to you during orientation. You are expected to read the entire policy, and a signed copy will be kept with your employee records. Company uniforms. We believe that a professional image enhances our work product and makes us more competitive in the marketplace. In part, we convey that image through the appearance of our employees. All employees that work in the field must wear company uniforms. If an employee shows up to work without his or her uniform, they will be sent home, and not allowed to work for that entire day. We also ask our employees to maintain a neat and clean appearance at all times. Uniforms are deducted weekly from the employee's paycheck, and range from approximately $5 to $7 per week, based on the uniforms chosen by the employee. Field employees must also wear work boots in the field. Each field employee can choose any combination of 11 of the shirts to the left, and will receive 11 cargo pants. Our current pickup for uniforms is every Wednesday. Soiled uniforms must be turned in by then. Credit card policy. Trademark will issue company credit cards to certain employees for use in their jobs. Use of company-issued credit cards is a privilege, which Trademark may withdraw in the event of serious or repeated abuse. Any credit card Trademark issues to an employee must be used for business purposes only, in conjunction with the employee's job duties. Employees with credit cards shall not use them for any non-business, non-essential purpose, or any personal purchase or any other transaction that is not authorized, or needed to carry out their duties. Tools must not be purchased on the company credit card without consent of your supervisor. You are required to bring your own hand tools to each job. Any unauthorized credit card purchases are considered to be theft, are taken very seriously, and subject to termination. Scanning receipts. All employees with credit cards are required to scan in all of the receipts from their purchases. After scanning the receipts to your folder, you must review all scanned-in receipts, correct any errors, and fill in any missing fields. The following video shows an overview of the Neat scanner that is used to scan in receipts.
Hey, whether you run a business or a household, you know that one of your biggest challenges is reducing all the paper clutter in your life. Neat 5 helps you manage personal or business-critical information better by transforming your receipts, business cards, documents, all your paperwork into organized digital files. Just pop your paper in the scanner and Neat 5 does the rest. Our patented technology reads and extracts key information from your receipts or business cards and auto-populates fields, so you don't have to enter anything manually. And you can do it anywhere, sitting in a coffee shop, waiting in an airport, turning all your analog stuff into usable digital information. All your information is keyword searchable, so you can find important documents such as bank statements or favorite articles in just seconds. Plus, Neat 5 helps you synchronize business card data with contact management systems like Outlook. Our new reporting wizard lets you quickly create expense, tax, or spending reports and save them in the format of your choice. Plus, you can import PDFs and print web receipts and digital documents all directly to Neat. And you can export data to Quicken and QuickBooks with just a few clicks. With Neat 5, you can do it all. Organize it, secure it, share it, even search it to get more work done faster and easier.
OSHA construction safety.
In the U.S., more than 800 construction workers die every year while on the job. Falls are the #1 cause of fatalities in construction. Falls cause 1 of every 3 construction worker deaths. These falls happen in a split second while workers are on roofs, scaffolds, ladders, bridges, and other work surfaces. But these deaths can be prevented. The video you're about to see shows how quickly falls at construction sites can lead to workers' deaths. The video will also show what employers must do so that the work can be done more safely. Employers have a responsibility to provide a safe workplace and required protective equipment. you'll see that using the right type of fall protection saves lives. Please be advised, the scenes you're about to see deal with deaths at construction sites and might be disturbing for some people. All scenes are based on true stories. Two workers were re-roofing a two-story home with a pitched roof. They were not wearing any personal fall protection. The workers used nail guns to install shingles over an old layer of shingles. One of the workers was close to the edge of the roof. As she reached to pick up another shingle, she lost her balance. She slipped off the edge of the roof. She fell more than 20 feet and landed on the driveway below. She died instantly from her injuries. Let's look at the events leading up to this tragic incident and see how it could have been prevented. Originally, the workers had no fall protection, which OSHA requires when working in residential construction at heights of 6 feet and above. Let's look again at the workers installing shingles. Now they are both wearing personal fall arrest systems. Each system has a full body harness, a rope grab lifeline, and connectors. Snap hooks connect each worker's rope grab lifeline to secure roof anchors, which are located higher up on the roof. D-rings connect the workers' safety harnesses to their rope grab lifelines. As before, the worker reaches over to pick up a shingle, loses her balance, slips, and falls. But now, because she's wearing a fall arrest system, she only slips 2 feet and doesn't fall off the roof. This example shows the importance of employers following OSHA's fall protection standards to ensure that workers are provided with a safe workplace. These types of construction deaths are preventable. The fall protection measures shown here save workers' lives. Use fall protection on the job. It could be the difference between life and death. If you would like more information, contact OSHA at www.osha.gov or 1-800-321-OSHA. That's 1-800-321-6742. In the U.S., more than 800 construction workers die every year while on the job. Falls are the #1 cause of fatalities in construction. Falls cause 1 of every 3 construction worker deaths. These falls happen in a split second while workers are on roofs, scaffolds, ladders, bridges, and other work surfaces. But these deaths can be prevented. The video you're about to see shows how quickly falls at construction sites can lead to workers' deaths. The video will also show what employers must do so that the work can be done more safely. Employers have a responsibility to provide a safe workplace and required protective equipment. You'll see that using the right type of fall protection saves lives. Please be advised, the scenes you're about to see deal with deaths at construction sites and might be disturbing for some people. All scenes are based on true stories. 2 workers were framing the walls of a new 2-story house with a basement. They were working on the 2nd floor near an open stairwell. There was no guardrail or floor cover, and the workers were not wearing personal fall protection. After framing one section of a wall, the workers raised it and moved forward to put it into place. While moving forward, one of the workers stepped towards the unguarded stairwell to hold the side of the wall section. He fell down the unguarded stairwell opening. He fell 20 feet and landed on the concrete basement floor. He died from fatal head and internal injuries. Let's look at the events leading up to this tragic incident and see how it could have been prevented. Originally, the workers were nailing in the boards to frame a section of the new wall, and the stairwell was not protected by a guardrail. Now, the stairwell is protected by a guardrail as required by OSHA. As before, the workers are moving forward to install the completed wall section. This time, as the worker steps toward the stairwell, the guardrail stops him. He continues forward to place the frame section in place. Another way to protect workers is by putting a proper cover over the stairwell opening. The cover must be secure. As shown here, the worker steps onto the cover and continues to put the section in place. This example shows the importance of employers following OSHA's fall protection standards to ensure that workers are provided with a safe workplace. These types of construction deaths are preventable. The fall protection measures shown here save workers' lives. Use fall protection on the job. It could be the difference between life and death. If you would like more information, contact OSHA at www.osha.gov or 1-800-321-OSHA. That's 1-800-321-6742. In the U.S., more than 800 construction workers die every year while on the job. Falls are the #1 cause of fatalities in construction. Falls cause 1 of every 3 construction worker deaths. These falls happen in a split second while workers are on roofs, scaffolds, ladders, bridges, and other work surfaces. But these deaths can be prevented. The video you're about to see shows how quickly falls at construction sites can lead to workers' deaths. The video will also show what employers must do so that the work can be done more safely. Employers have a responsibility to provide a safe workplace and required protective equipment. You'll see that using the right type of fall protection saves lives. Please be advised, the scenes you're about to see deal with deaths at construction sites and might be disturbing for some people. All scenes are based on true stories. A worker was installing vinyl siding on a 2-story townhome. He was standing on a ladder that was placed on top of a scaffold. A coworker was on the scaffold cutting pieces of siding. The scaffold had no guardrails. The workers were not wearing any fall protection. While standing on the top step of the ladder, the worker putting up siding overreached to one side and the ladder overturned. He fell nearly 20 feet and landed on the driveway below. He died later that day from injuries caused by the fall. Let's look at the events leading up to this tragic incident and see how it could have been prevented. Originally, the worker installing siding was standing on a ladder that was placed on top of a scaffold. This is a very serious and dangerous OSHA violation. Also, there was no fall protection for these workers. OSHA requires employers to provide workers with fall protection when they're working on scaffolds more than 10 feet above a lower level. Let's look again at the worker installing siding. But now, the worker is standing on a fully decked pump jack scaffold. It has guardrails at the top, middle, and ends. So instead of being at risk from falling while installing siding, this worker is now protected from fall hazards. This example shows the importance of employers following OSHA's fall protection standards to ensure that workers are provided with a safe workplace. These types of construction deaths are preventable. The fall protection measures shown here save workers' lives. Use fall protection on the job. It could be the difference between life and death. If you would like more information, contact OSHA at www.osha.gov or 1-800-321-OSHA. That's 1-800-321-6742.
Welcome to WXTV, your source for energy efficiency and home performance. As part of our health and safety series, today we'll be taking a look at fall protection. On a job site like this, 1 in every 3 fatalities is due to falls. The OSHA rule is, if you could fall just 6 feet or more from a working surface, fall protection is required. We're in our training center now at our fall protection station, and we want to show you one of the most common ways that you can protect against falls when doing retrofit work like installing a vent or solar panels or making minor repairs. And that's with a personal fall arrest system. In covering our preferences for personal fall arrest systems, we'll be talking about anchors, ropes, catches, and lanyards, and full body harnesses. It's important to keep in mind when assembling a fall protection system that it's not enough to just support your body weight. That's just part of the equation. A falling body can generate an extreme amount of force, and that force increases the further and faster the body falls. At the heart of any personal fall arrest system is the anchor. Now, in order to withstand the forces generated in a fall, OSHA requires that your anchor be rated to 5,000 pounds. There are a lot of different types of anchors on the market. These two happen to be roof anchors or ridgeline anchors. And even there are different types within that group. It's always important to take a look at the directions that should be printed on the anchor itself so you know how to install it, where you can install it, and what types of tools and materials you'll need to do the job. So this one right here we're going to install with 16D nails. It says we're using 20 side holes, and we're going to nail into the sheathing. Now some of them, you can see, will have slightly different nail patterns here. These have 10 holes along the edges that are labeled as the nail holes, and on the back side we notice that those go into the sheathing, whereas if we're using lag screws, we have 6 per side here, so 12 total, and those lags going directly into the trusses. Whereas this one actually just has the 3 lags going in directly into the truss member, and you can see by the nailing pattern, and when we read the directions, we'll note that the 16D nails in this one go directly into the trusses rather than just the sheathing, and so they're just using 6 on there. An additional piece of information you should note in the manufacturer's instructions is whether the roof anchor can be used and then reused. Some are meant to be discarded after used just one time. Let's go ahead and install this one, but before we do, there's one question that I receive more than any other, and that is, do you need fall protection when you're installing a roof anchor? And the answer according to OSHA is no. You don't need to use fall protection when you're either doing an inspection on a roof or while you're installing your personal fall arrest systems. Attached to your anchor is your vertical lifeline, or your rope. Now, attachments should be equipped with a locking mechanism. You can see that I have to depress the back portion before this will open. That's to prevent it from accidentally opening while you're working on the roof somewhere else. And now the ropes. To be in compliance with OSHA, ropes have to be made out of man-made materials. They can't be natural fibers like hemp. So you're looking for nylon, Spectra, things of that nature. They also have to meet all OSHA regulations and ANSI standards. Now, if you buy one at the store, it should be labeled as such. That means that at the very least, they have a max arrest force of 900 pounds. And like any piece of fall protection equipment, ropes should be inspected prior to use. They have a tendency to get abraded, frayed, and damaged by chemicals in the sun. That's not something you want to miss if this is what you're going to trust your life to. The length of the rope is of course important. The obvious point being that you don't want to fall off the eave of the roof and hit the ground before the rope catches you, or even fall so far that you build up enough momentum to create a force that could break your rope. So let's set aside this particular rope here, which has a commercially bought catch device on it, and let's talk about a fixed length of rope that you may tie off end to end. We have one here that's a climbing rope, and as you can see, we've got an appropriate knot on the end connected to a locking carabiner. When you are purchasing carabiners, you should make sure, first of all, that it's a locking carabiner, and second of all, that it has a sufficient strength rating you're looking for 22.2 kilonewtons or more. You can see that this one's rated for 23 in the direction of pull. This end is attached to your roof anchor and locked. Ensure that it's locked. It is not sufficient to just tie this rope off to your anchor directly. You do need to have a locking metal attachment device like a locking carabiner. The other end of the rope should be tied off at a point that gives you enough room to work, but not so much that you're going to take a big fall. So we'll go ahead and make a loop in this. And we'll use the same thing. We'll use a locking carabiner that attaches to our harness. One thing that makes managing your rope length easy is to use a commercially available rope catch like this one here. You can see it just moves up and down, and when we want it at a length, simply applying pressure to that lever locks it off. Now, a couple things to note on it. It does have an up and a down direction. It's never going to catch going up. It's also never going to catch going down unless you're putting weight on the lever. It'd be easy to want to hold it by the body here and move up and down, but unfortunately, if you do start to fall, it's not going to catch. Always move up and down the rope by holding on to that ring. That way, if you do have a tendency to fall, it catches. This rope catch comes with a shock-absorbing lanyard on it, which takes the strain of a fall off the rope itself. A shock-absorbing lanyard typically uses stitched-together sections of webbing or an elastomeric section to take the strain off the rope itself during a fall. You've probably noted during the filming of this that using ropes can create a bit of a tripping hazard. One solution for that is to use a retractable system like this one here. So it works on an inertia reel just like the seat belts in your car. You can slowly pull out to the length you need, but the minute you build up any kind of momentum, it locks off. Snug but not too tight, and you want it to be right at the center of the chest, just like you have it here. The final piece that we're going to cover in personal fall arrest systems is the full body harness like the one shown here. A full body harness includes webbing that comes over the shoulders, wraps behind the back, and encircles each leg, including a sternum strap. The harness should be sized individually for each person. And starting with the leg loops, they should be tight but not restrictive. Straps should go all the way through the buckle here, go through the keeper, and then doubled back if you have that option, which just prevents it from coming out any further. Moving up, the sternum strap should be about even with the armpits there, right in the center of the chest. And it should be tight enough to prevent these shoulder straps from coming off the shoulders. The attachment point is another piece that can be adjusted for the individual. It should be in the center of the back between the shoulder blades. This one could probably stand to be just a touch higher. Inspection is key. Before you put this on, inspect it for abrasions, excessive wear, rips and tears, and you'll notice that these have impact indicators. Much like that shock-absorbing lanyard that we showed you earlier, this is just stitched pieces of webbing here that in the event of an impact should rip free and indicate that this particular harness should be taken out of service. You can keep a record of your inspections right on the harness itself. And of course, if you forget any of what we've talked about here, there's always directions that'll tell you how to put it on and how to wear it properly.
In the U.S., more than 800 construction workers die every year while on the job. Being struck by vehicles, heavy equipment, and other objects is the top cause of injuries and the second cause of death for construction workers, killing more than 150 workers in 2009. But these injuries and deaths can be prevented. The video you're about to see shows how quickly struck-by accidents at construction sites can lead to worker deaths. The video will also show what employers must do so that the work can be done more safely. Employers have a responsibility to provide a safe workplace and required protective equipment. You'll see that taking the right protective steps saves lives. Please be advised, the scenes you're about to see deal with deaths at construction sites and might be disturbing for some people. All scenes are based on true stories. A surveyor was spray painting the ground to outline the area for a new building pad. At the same time, the driver of a wheel tractor scraper was moving forward to get the ground ready for pad construction. There was no spotter at the site, and there was no internal traffic control plan in place. Before backing up to go over the ground again, the driver checked his rear view and side mirrors. He didn't see anyone in his mirrors, so he backed up. The driver's backup alarm didn't work, so the surveyor did not hear the scraper coming towards her. As the driver backed up, he ran over the surveyor. She died from the injuries. Let's look at the events leading up to this tragic incident and see how it could have been prevented. When a vehicle on a construction site has an obstructed view to the rear, OSHA's standard requires employers to provide that vehicle with a working backup alarm or a spotter on site to tell the driver when it is safe to back up. Now let's see what happens when protective measures are in place. Although there is now a working backup alarm, it is barely audible over the background noise. So as an added safety measure, there's also a spotter on site wearing a reflective vest. There's also an internal traffic control plan in place. This plan helps protect workers because it tells the drivers of moving vehicles and equipment the safest way to move around the work site. So this time, before backing up, the scraper's driver waits for the spotter's signal so he knows the area is clear to enter. Now, as the driver reverses, the backup alarm can be heard, and no workers are near the scraper. This example shows the importance of employers following OSHA's vehicle safety standards for construction sites to ensure that workers are provided with a safe workplace. These types of construction worker deaths are preventable. The protective measures shown here save workers' lives. Please follow OSHA's safety standards at work sites. It could be the difference between life and death. In the U.S., more than 800 construction workers die every year while on the job. Many of these deaths happen when workers breathe in harmful chemicals. Carbon monoxide poisoning is the #1 cause of these deaths from breathing in harmful chemicals. It is so dangerous because people can't smell, see, or taste it, and it can kill within minutes. But these deaths can be prevented. The video you're about to see shows how quickly carbon monoxide can lead to workers' deaths. The video will also show what employers must do to assure that this work can be done more safely. Employers have a responsibility to provide a safe workplace and required protective equipment. You'll see that using the right type of protection saves lives. Please be advised, the scenes you're about to see deal with deaths at construction sites and might be disturbing for some people. All scenes are based on true stories. 2 workers were framing and finishing the basement renovation of a 2-story home. One worker was using a gasoline-powered wet saw to cut a hole in the concrete wall for a window, while another worker was marking lines for the next window to be cut. 2 newly cut window holes were sealed so that no fresh air was coming into the basement. As they worked, exhaust from the wet concrete saw entered the air. Many things were in the exhaust, including carbon monoxide. This very dangerous and deadly gas can't be smelled, seen, or tasted. So the workers didn't know they were being harmed, and because no fresh air was coming into their work area, the amount of carbon monoxide continued to increase as the saw was used. After using the saw on and off for about 3 hours, the worker outlining the new window complained of a headache. She tried to go upstairs and get some fresh air, but she fell to the ground before getting to it. The coworker turned off the saw and tried to assist her, but he quickly became dizzy and collapsed on the ground also. Coworkers arrived on the scene hours later, but they were too late. Both workers died from carbon monoxide poisoning. Let's look at the events leading up to this tragic incident and see how it could have been prevented. These workers were in a closed-in space where a gasoline-powered concrete saw was being used. Because there was no fresh air coming into this work area and the exhaust was not released to the outside, the carbon monoxide from the exhaust stayed in the room. There was also no carbon monoxide detector or alarm to warn the workers of the danger. The best way for these workers to stay safe from carbon monoxide poisoning is to not use a gasoline-powered saw. Instead, they should use a hydraulic or pneumatic concrete saw, which do not produce carbon monoxide. Let's take a look again at the workers in the basement. Now the workers are using a hydraulic saw, and there is no buildup of carbon monoxide. This video shows how using a gasoline-powered saw led to carbon monoxide poisoning, killing these workers. But this is not the only equipment construction workers use that can lead to carbon monoxide poisoning. It can happen with other fuel-powered tools. Some examples include portable generators, space heaters such as salamanders, trowels, and water pumps. This example shows the importance of employers following OSHA's standards to ensure that workers are provided with a safe workplace. These types of construction deaths are preventable. The protective measures shown here save workers' lives. Use these protections on the job. It could be the difference between life and death. If you would like more information, contact OSHA at www.osha.gov.
This video provides a brief overview and general information on respiratory hazards in construction and respiratory protection program requirements. The Federal Occupational Safety and Health Administration, also called OSHA, and state OSHA agencies require employers to have respiratory protection programs if their workers are required to wear respirators on the job. This video does not cover all of the things that your employer must do under federal OSHA or state OSHA respiratory protection standards. This video can be a part of the OSHA required respiratory protection training, which includes many topics, like how to put on and take off a respirator and how to use, clean, and maintain your respirator. Your employer must also provide you with worksite-specific training. While this video discusses some of your employer's responsibilities under OSHA's respiratory protection standard, it is important to remember that the purpose of a respirator is to protect your health and safety. Gases, dusts, mists, and fumes may be present at construction work sites. Some of these can make you sick or kill you if you breathe them in. These gases, dusts, mists, and fumes are referred to as respiratory hazards. Some respiratory hazards act quickly, like carbon monoxide, which can make you unconscious or kill you in minutes. Other respiratory hazards can take years to make you sick, like asbestos, which can cause lung cancer decades after you breathe it in. More examples of respiratory hazards in construction include lead dust and fumes from grinding, welding, cutting, or brazing surfaces coated with lead-based paint. Silica dust from cutting concrete or sandblasting. Solvent vapors from adhesives, paints, strippers, cleaning solvents, and spray coatings. And isocyanate vapors from spray foam insulation and certain spray paints or coatings. When there are respiratory hazards at your job site, your employer must use several methods to reduce your exposure to them, including engineering controls, such as local exhaust ventilation, work practice controls, such as using wet cutting techniques, and administrative controls, such as minimizing the number of workers exposed to the hazard. When you and your coworkers cannot be adequately protected from respiratory hazards through use of these methods, then your employer must provide you with an appropriate respirator to protect your health. Respiratory protection must be selected based on the hazard you will be exposed to on the job. Not every respirator will protect you against every hazard, so it's important for your employer to select the right one. For example, filtering face piece respirators may protect you against particulate hazards such as dusts. However, a filtering face piece respirator will not protect you against gas and vapor hazards like solvent vapors. If you are exposed to gases and vapors, you will need a different type of respirator. For example, you could use an air purifying respirator with chemical cartridges or an atmosphere supplying respirator, such as an airline respirator or self-contained breathing apparatus. In addition, atmosphere supplying respirators are the only respirators that will protect you against hazardous atmospheres, such as carbon monoxide and lack of oxygen. Selecting an appropriate respirator is your employer's responsibility. When respirators must be used on your job site, your employer must have a respiratory protection program. This program must meet the requirements of either the federal OSHA or your state OSHA respiratory protection standard. The standard requires your employer to do the following: develop and implement a written respiratory protection program. Evaluate the respiratory hazards in the workplace. Select and provide appropriate respirators. Provide worker medical evaluations and respirator fit testing. Provide for the maintenance, storage, and cleaning of respirators. Provide worker training about respiratory hazards and proper respirator use. Evaluate workers' use of respirators and correct any problems. And provide you with access to specific records and documents, such as a written copy of your employer's respiratory protection program. Some of these requirements, such as training and fit testing, can be provided by an outside party, including a union, an apprenticeship program, a contractors association, or a past employer, provided they were conducted within the last 12 months. However, it is still your current employer's responsibility to ensure that all of the requirements of the standard have been met. Because each workplace is different, it is very important that your employer's respiratory protection program address the conditions found in your specific workplace. For example, workplaces may differ in the following ways: the types and amount of respiratory hazards present, the people who manage the program, the policies and procedures for tasks such as respirator selection, maintenance, and use, and other methods for controlling exposure, such as using wet cutting techniques to reduce airborne dusts. Since construction work settings change over time, the written program must be updated as necessary to account for those changes in workplace conditions that affect respirator use. For example, changes in workplace conditions could include new work processes or techniques, such as introducing sandblasting into an area, the use of new or different building materials or chemicals, changes in the amount of a respiratory hazard in the workplace, or changes in the types of respirators being used. Notify your supervisor if something changes in your workplace that conflicts with or may not be covered by your respirator training or established workplace policies or procedures. Your employer's respiratory protection program must be managed by a qualified, trained program administrator. This person must monitor the program and make sure that you and your coworkers are adequately protected. The program administrator will know a lot about your workplace respiratory protection program and should be able to answer any questions you may have about respirator use. The program administrator must know about the requirements of the OSHA Respiratory Protection Standard and must periodically evaluate the program and make any necessary changes. This video has provided you with a brief overview of respiratory hazards in construction and respiratory protection program requirements. There are many other things that you must know and do before you can safely use a respirator in a hazardous work environment. While this video may be a part of your respiratory protection training, your employer must also provide you with additional training on respirators, including worksite-specific training. Remember, if you don't know if a respirator is needed for the task you will be doing, or if you are unsure about how to properly use a respirator or which filter or cartridge to use, talk to your supervisor before entering the hazardous area. For more information about respirator use in your workplace, refer to these OSHA and NIOSH websites. You will find OSHA's Respiratory Protection Standard, additional respirator training videos, and other guidance material to help you work safely.
Each year in the U.S., 31,000 construction workers seek medical attention due to sprains and strains suffered on the job. These injuries happen when the human body is forced to work beyond its limits. Lifting, pulling, pushing, reaching, bending, and other common construction activities can cause these injuries. The pain resulting from these injuries can last a lifetime and affect construction workers' lives at work and at home. But these injuries can be prevented. This video shows how overexertion at construction sites can lead to worker injuries. The video will also show what employers must do so that the work can be done more safely. Employers have a responsibility to provide a safe workplace and required protective equipment. You'll see that taking the right protective steps can help prevent these injuries. An experienced commercial electrician was wiring a newly built commercial building. He'd been doing this kind of work for several years. While standing on a ladder that was too short for the job, he pulled long runs of a heavy gauge wire. He then attached the wiring above his head to the ceiling. The job involves awkward pulling movements while reaching overhead. After several days on the job, the stress on the electrician's arms, neck, back, and shoulders has become too much. As a result, the pain the electrician feels has affected his ability to do the work. Let's look at the events leading up to these injuries and see how they could have been prevented. As before, the electrician is attaching wiring to the ceiling. But this time, he is standing on an elevated platform that is the right height for the job. This reduces his overhead movements and prevents stress to his body. Also, as he attaches the wiring, he is now using a mechanical wire puller to get the wire he needs. This way, he doesn't hurt himself by pulling the wire by hand and straining his body as he did before. Making these types of small changes in work activities can prevent painful injuries. This example shows the importance of employers using OSHA's ergonomics guidelines. These are guidelines designed so workers can avoid stress and injury to their bodies. These types of injuries are preventable. Follow OSHA's guidelines at work sites. By following the guidelines, workers can avoid suffering a lifetime of pain from these injuries. If you would like more information, contact OSHA at www.osha.gov.
Some hazards are pretty obvious. You don't need special training to know that high-powered lines are dangerous or that hot coffee can burn. Or that electricity and water don't mix. Anyone with common sense can figure out these risks for themselves. But not all hazards are so obvious. Take asbestos exposure, for example. You can't see asbestos fibers with the naked eye. They may cause no immediate health effects, so you can't tell if you're being overexposed. In fact, some asbestos-related illnesses can take more than 30 years to show up. By the time the symptoms appear, it's too late to do anything about them. That's why you have to take asbestos exposure seriously now. In this program, we'll show you how to recognize and reduce the risk of asbestos exposure in the workplace. You'll learn what asbestos is, where you're likely to find it on construction jobs, and the hazards associated with asbestos exposure. And you'll learn how to protect yourself by using safe work practices, engineering controls, and most importantly, knowing what areas to stay clear of while you're working on the job. Let's talk first about what asbestos is and where it's found in construction. Asbestos is a naturally occurring mineral made up of long, thread-like fibers. It's strong, flexible, it doesn't conduct electricity, and it's resistant to fire and chemicals. These properties made it a popular choice for building materials for close to 100 years. Asbestos was used in the construction industry in many different ways. Asbestos insulation was applied to pipes, fittings, boilers, and tanks to prevent heat loss. Asbestos surfacing materials were troweled or sprayed onto ceilings and structural members for acoustical insulation and fireproofing. Asbestos was used in wallboard, floor tiles, mastic, high-temperature gaskets, roofing materials, and many others. So widespread was its use that if you're working on a structure constructed before 1980, there's a good chance you'll encounter asbestos somewhere on the site. It wasn't until the 1930s that the negative effects of asbestos exposure first became known. Let's take a look at some of the health risks associated with asbestos. The asbestos mineral is made up of thousands of long, thin fibers, each of which looks like a microscopic hollow tube. When the air catches these tube-like fibers, they become airborne. With just the slightest breeze, they can float for as long as 2 days. The danger of asbestos exposure lies in inhaling these fibers. When asbestos fibers enter your lungs, they attach themselves to the lung wall. The body's defense system can't break them down, so they remain there forever. Gradually, scar tissue begins to form over the fibers. This painful condition is called asbestosis. As the scarring gets worse, the lungs lose their ability to expand and contract, so every breath becomes an effort and pain, or a dull ache may occur in the chest. Repeated exposure to high concentrations of asbestos can also make you 5 times more likely than the general public to get lung cancer. And it makes you susceptible to a rare form of cancer called mesothelioma, which attacks the lining of the chest cavity. Mesothelioma can occur after only a short but intensive exposure to asbestos. All of these diseases can take from 20 to 40 years to show up. It's important to keep in mind that there's no cure for any of them. The only way to ensure that you don't wind up with an asbestos-related illness in the future is to protect yourself now. There are a number of ways you can help keep yourself safe. One way you can reduce your risk of asbestos exposure is by using engineering controls and safe work practices anytime you're working around asbestos-containing materials or materials that you suspect may contain asbestos. OSHA has designated 4 classes of asbestos-related work, and the type of precautions you need depends on the type of work you'll be doing. Class 1 work involves the removal of asbestos insulation and surfacing materials such as sprayed-on or troweled-on acoustical insulation and fireproofing. Be aware, in all structures built up to 1980, OSHA requires that all thermal insulation and surfacing materials be presumed to contain asbestos. Proper precautions need to be taken until the materials are proven to be free of asbestos. Class 2 asbestos work means the removal of asbestos-containing wallboard, floor tile and sheeting, roofing materials, siding shingles, and construction mastics. As with Class 1 work, all materials from 1980 or earlier must be considered asbestos-containing until they're tested to prove they're asbestos-free. Within Class 2, there are special requirements for removing asbestos-containing roofing materials and floor tiles. In these materials, the asbestos is embedded in the asphalt, tile, or mastic. The goal of the special regulations is to keep those asbestos fibers from being released during removal. Class 3 work involves repair or maintenance operations that could disturb asbestos-containing materials, such as cutting out pipe valves or replacing asbestos-containing gaskets. These three classes of work require special training, special equipment, and special procedures to avoid release of or exposure to asbestos fibers. For example, all Class 1 work and some Class 2 work must be done by licensed asbestos abatement personnel only. In most states, licenses are issued by the state to those workers who have attended a certified asbestos training course and passed an examination. In addition, all Class 1, 2, and 3 work must take place within a regulated area that's clearly marked by warning signs. Only trained and authorized persons are allowed inside the regulated area. Respirators are required on all Class 1 jobs and on some Class 2 jobs also. Some asbestos work requires head-to-toe personal protective equipment with whole body covering, head covering, foot coverings, and gloves, and special decontamination procedures to keep asbestos fibers from leaving the regulated area. You should not be involved in work that requires measures like these. That should be left for the licensed asbestos abatement professionals. Most of the work you're likely to see will fall under Class 4. Class 4 asbestos work involves maintaining or working around asbestos-containing materials without disturbing them. So, if you're on a site where asbestos removal is taking place, or if you're working around asbestos-containing materials, even if you're not handling it yourself, you may be considered a Class 4 worker. Cleaning up very small amounts of asbestos, dust, or debris is also considered Class 4 work. However, you should not enter a restricted area or containment area without first receiving further training in using proper personal protective equipment, such as respirators and disposable coveralls. When you're doing Class 4 work, your risk of asbestos exposure is much lower than with other types of asbestos work. But that doesn't mean you can slack off on safety. Remember, carelessness today can lead to illness years down the line. So let's look at what you need to know in order to do this type of work safely. The first thing you need to know is where you're likely to find asbestos. That way, you can avoid accidental exposure. As we said at the beginning of this program, asbestos was used widely in the construction industry for 100 years. If you're working on a structure that was built up to 1980, assume that any of the materials we discussed earlier, including sprayed or troweled-on insulation, pipe insulation, floor tile, and roofing materials, contain asbestos, unless proven otherwise. Finding out if asbestos is present requires sending samples of the material to a laboratory for testing. You can't tell whether material contains asbestos just by eyeballing it. If you have any concerns about the presence of asbestos on a job site, your supervisor will have information on the asbestos testing and the results. Since asbestos fibers only become harmful when they're released into the air, such as during removal, many building owners choose to leave asbestos insulation in place and encapsulate it in special materials that prevent the release of fibers. If you encounter asbestos-containing material, or potentially asbestos-containing material like those we just mentioned, be careful not to disturb them. That way, you protect yourself and your coworkers from possible exposure. Don't tear open pipe insulation, or scrape or pick away at fireproofing. And don't cut or sand floor tiles, roofing materials, or wallboard until you are sure it's safe to do so. Leave the asbestos work to people who have the right training and equipment for handling asbestos-containing materials. What happens when you're at a job site where asbestos-containing materials are present? What should you look for to determine whether conditions are safe? Here are some warning signs to be aware of. Is the pipe insulation intact? Or are there tears in the protective cover so that you can see the raw insulation or any visible water staining that may indicate damage to asbestos? Is sprayed-on or troweled-on material solidly in place, or is it falling off, shaggy looking or stringy? Is it water stained, or are there strong drafts of air blowing across the surface of the material? Are there pieces of floor tile scattered about where they can be stepped on and crushed? If you can answer yes to any of these questions, notify your supervisor immediately. These are signs that the asbestos could be damaged and that fibers could be released into the air. Keeping asbestos materials intact and avoiding damaged materials greatly reduces your potential for exposure. Very small amounts of asbestos can be cleaned up if you remember one thing: keep it wet. If you need to clean up a small amount of asbestos dust or debris, wet it down with water before handling it. Wetting greatly reduces the number of fibers that will become airborne. Don't sweep or shovel the material dry. The only time wet methods aren't required is when water would pose an electrical hazard or other serious threat. If this is the case, it's time to call in an asbestos professional. An alternative method for cleaning up asbestos is to use vacuum cleaners equipped with high-efficiency particulate air, also known as HEPA, filters to remove dust and debris. These are super-efficient filters that can trap 99.97% of all airborne particles, keeping them out of the air and out of your lungs. Finally, dispose of all asbestos-contaminated waste and debris promptly. Use leak-tight containers and make sure they're properly sealed and labeled. When you're working on a job where asbestos work is taking place, keep yourself out of harm's way. Watch for signs and warnings indicating an asbestos removal or work area, and don't enter regulated areas or decontamination rooms. In this program, we've talked about ways to keep yourself safe from asbestos exposure. But there's one more precaution you should know about. One of the most important things you can do to protect yourself from getting an asbestos-related illness in the future is to stop smoking now. You see, smoking paralyzes the tiny hair-like cells called cilia that sweep foreign particles out of your respiratory system. So, if you smoke, you make it easier for asbestos fibers to enter your lungs and cause disease. Remember when we said that workers who are exposed to asbestos have a 5 times greater risk of getting lung cancer? Well, for asbestos-exposed smokers, the risk is 50 times greater. Those aren't good odds. Today, there are material safety data sheets to inform you of hazards associated with the materials you handle on the job. Everything from solvents to ladders to power tools carry warning labels to help you recognize and protect yourself against workplace hazards. But you won't often find any warnings on asbestos-containing materials or existing structures. It's up to you to learn to recognize materials that could potentially contain asbestos and to use the engineering controls and work practices that will keep you safe on the job.
This electrical awareness video is focused on identifying hazards around electricity on the job site. All other hazards on the job require the same focus and respect while performing your hazard assessments, and should not be disregarded or have any less importance placed on them. Electricity is all around us. It is an essential element in our daily lives. Nearly everything we do is connected with electricity. On the job site, working around electricity can be very safe when workers properly identify and mitigate the hazards. If hazards are ignored, electricity can strike out, and its effects can be devastating. As with any task on the job site, you should never attempt to perform work without the proper training and experience. Only qualified personnel should be involved in the operation or repairs of electrical equipment. Inadequate training, lack of experience, and failure to recognize potential hazards could result in electric shock or arc flash. Electric shock can occur when a worker approaches or contacts exposed energized electrical equipment. Workers' exposure to electric shock can vary from a tingling sensation to involuntary muscle contraction causing respiratory paralysis, ventricular fibrillation, and severe internal and external burns, and even death. The victim is also at risk of other serious physical harm, such as falling from heights. Arc flash results from two electrical components sustaining an arcing fault. If conditions are correct, an arc flash will result, followed by a blast wave containing molten metal, shrapnel, and toxic gases. No matter the severity, any worker exposed to any level of electrical shock or flash must seek medical attention. While electricity has the power to seriously harm you, the risks of electrical shock can be mitigated and work can be safely carried out without incident. Electrical safety begins with the proper use of field-level hazard assessments and identifying the potential hazards. Your hazard assessment is the first step in protecting you and everyone else on your job site from any associated hazards, which may include electric shock. A brief inspection of your job site will help identify other potential electrical hazards. While performing your walkthrough, look, listen, and smell. This will assist you in identifying the hazards on your site. All power tools and equipment should be plugged into a GFCI. This is a must when working in wet, moist, or exterior locations. Ground fault circuit interrupters monitor the balance of electricity flow and can detect even minor imbalances and will trip, reducing the risk of electric shock. Bump testing the GFCI before use must be done to ensure the unit is functioning properly. By pressing the test button, the receptacle should trip. Pushing the reset button should restore power to the GFCI unit. If this fails, the GFCI unit is defective and must be taken out of service. Adequate lighting is a must in your work area. If light levels are too low, additional lighting must be installed on either a temporary or permanent basis. Whenever working directly around electrical equipment, the de-energizing of equipment is the recommended practice. De-energizing equipment removes the potential for electrical shock as power is removed. This can be achieved with the proper use of a lockout-tagout system. While basic procedures may vary from site to site, it is essential for you to understand the lockout-tagout procedure being used at your job site. One thing that does not change from site to site, however, is that you may never remove another party's lock in a lockout-tagout system. Before using any electrical cords or tools, always inspect individual items to ensure they're in good working order. Faulty equipment can lead to personal injury and poses a risk to all those on a job site. If items are damaged or are in poor working condition, tag the item and take it out of service for repair or replacement. Always know the locations of fire extinguishers on your site. These should be rated safe for use with electrical fires. Common practice is the use of a dry chemical type ABC fire extinguisher. Depending on the type of work you're doing, a hot work or electrical permit may be required. Always ensure you're in compliance with your site-specific policies and procedures regarding permitting controls. Always consider overhead hazards in your work area. Power lines are an ever-present danger due to the possibility of electrical arcing or direct contact and should always be marked. High voltage hazards can also be in the ground. Line locates are required by law before any ground disturbance takes place. Always call before you dig. Occupational health and safety regulates minimum work distances to electrical sources with certain voltages and should be referred to before working near any high voltage sources. It is extremely important to recognize equipment in an abnormal condition, such as an open electrical panel, exposed wiring, sparks, smoke, or fire. When you encounter this situation, use the look, listen, and smell approach, as this is an immediate cue that extra caution should be used and may indicate a potentially dangerous situation is present. Water or liquids pose additional risk of electrical shock due to high conductivity. The hazard should be removed only after the area is de-energized. If you recognize a hazard that you cannot rectify, ensure that you ask questions and seek solutions from the appropriate personnel on site. Do not take it for granted that other workers understand the scope of your work or that there is a potential danger to you or to them. Common PPE requirements on job sites include cotton or fire-resistant pants, a cotton or fire-resistant shirt with a minimum 6-inch to full-length sleeve, electric shock-resistant or static dissipative footwear, Type 1 and 2 Class E and G protective headwear, additional high-vis clothing, safety glasses, and work gloves. For electrical workers that conduct their tasks around energized equipment, you should be aware of the CSA standard Z462. Competent workers need to be trained to this standard, which will help identify the hazards associated around electrical sources, what controls can be best used, as well as the additional specialized PPE required, such as arc flash clothing, arc flash face shield, rubber insulated gloves which include leather protectors, and more. PPE is your last line of defense. Do not use PPE as a substitute for the opportunity to control or remove existing hazards. In the event that all safeguard systems have failed and a coworker is being shocked, never come in direct contact with the worker, or you may become entrapped in the shock cycle. If possible, deactivate the power source and activate your emergency response plan. Working around electricity can be performed safely and without incident by executing sound judgment and diligent observations in order to create your field-level hazard assessment, and by following the proper safe work procedures. You'll be well on your way to completing your task without incident. Remember the importance of using the proper equipment in good condition and by wearing the proper personal protective equipment. By employing all these safeguards, not only will you help keep yourself and your coworkers safe, you'll help ensure that you'll return safely every day to the people who count on you the most.
In 1983, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, published the Hazard Communication Standard. This was one of the first major new standards since the original OSHA rules were published in 1971 and was often referred to as the Employee Right to Know standard. That's because it was developed to help ensure workers had access to information and training about the hazards of the chemicals and products they were exposed to at work. One of the major requirements of the HAZCOM standard was container labeling. But while the standard mandated that manufacturers provide specific information about their products on container labels, HAZCOM was a performance-based standard, meaning there was no specific format that had to be followed. As a result, container labels took on all shapes and forms, in part because manufacturers were free to use many different hazard warning and rating systems on their container labels. As you can imagine, all these different labeling systems led to a lot of frustration among workers. The Hazard Communication Standard was not meeting its original intent, which was to help employees know exactly what they were working with, how it could harm them, and most importantly, how to protect themselves. So in 2012, OSHA revised their Hazard Communication Standard, and a major part of that revision was how containers had to be labeled. While manufacturers still have to put labels on their containers, now that information has to follow a specific format. And there is a standardized hazard classification system that must be utilized on container labels to convey information about the physical and health-related hazards associated with that product. The HAZCOM standard also requires employers to train their employees on how to read and understand the new GHS labeling system. So the standard changed from Employee Right to Know to Employee Right to Understand. To improve information available to workers, OSHA adopted the labeling requirements of the GHS. That stands for the Globally Harmonized System of Classification and Labeling of Chemicals. The GHS is a standardized system, meaning there will be consistency in the information appearing on container labels once this system is fully adopted. This system was developed by the United Nations, which means that, once fully implemented, container labels for products from around the world will be standardized, which is of increased importance in our global economy. Here is an explanation of the information that must appear on container labels. First is the product or chemical identifier. This may be the name of the product itself or, as in this label, the specific name of the chemical. This information will also match up to the Safety Data Sheet, or SDS, for the product. Next is a signal word. There are only two that are used in this system, either the word danger, which indicates a relatively severe or immediate hazard, or warning, which indicates a less severe but still potentially harmful level of hazard. The next section contains one or several hazard statements. These standardized hazard statements give employees a quick warning about the hazards that are associated with the product and differ according to the classification and category of hazard or hazards presented by that product. The next section of the container label shows what are known as precautionary statements. These too are standardized in the GHS labeling system and in general convey information about how to prevent or lessen exposure to the chemical, as well as considerations for storage of the product, first aid procedures to be used when accidental overexposure occurs, and, where applicable, information on how to respond to an accidental spill or release of the product, as well as information about its proper disposal. Additional safety and health related information can be found on the product's Safety Data Sheet. GHS compliant labels must also display supplier information. This is where you will find the name of the manufacturer or distributor of that product, as well as their street address and telephone number. On some labels, you may see supplemental information about the product, such as directions for its use and possibly an expiration date for the product. And a key new requirement of the GHS labeling system, and something fairly new to us here in the United States, are pictograms. Pictograms are standardized icons that alert workers to the various hazards of the product in a container. There are 9 different pictograms used in the GHS labeling system. Pictograms will appear on all container labels, each one depicting a different health or safety hazard applicable to the particular product in that container. Some labels may have only one pictogram because there is only one class of hazard associated with that product. However, most labels will probably display multiple pictograms. By the way, pictograms appearing on a product label can also be found on the safety data sheet for that product, where you can get even more detailed information about hazards and recommended precautions. The first pictogram we will discuss is an icon of a flame. Obviously, this is associated with flammable liquids, solids, and aerosols, and will appear on labels for those products. This pictogram will also appear on labels of products that emit flammable gases, those which are pyrophoric, which means the chemical can possibly ignite within minutes of being exposed to air, self-heating chemicals, self-reactive chemicals, and organic peroxides, which are found in many products such as catalyst and curing agents. This pictogram of a flame over a circle identifies materials that are classified as oxidizers. While similar in appearance to the flame pictogram we just covered, oxidizers are actually materials that cause or contribute more oxygen to the combustion process, making other materials burn much more rapidly than they normally would. So care must be taken to avoid storing these products near flammable and combustible materials. The third pictogram depicts an exploding bomb and appears on products that are explosive. It can also be found on labels for self-reactive products and for organic peroxides. The compressed gas cylinder will appear on labels of cylinders of compressed gas under pressure. Care must be taken when handling these cylinders because in the right conditions, a broken regulator or valve can cause the cylinder to become a projectile. Also, when a compressed gas leaks into an enclosed space, such as through a leaking hose or crack valve, the gas can fill up the space and cause an oxygen-deficient atmosphere. And some gases are liquefied so they can be placed inside a cylinder. Some of these gases rapidly expand and cool when released from the cylinder and can even cause frostbite injuries if the gas makes contact with any part of your body. The corrosion pictogram will appear on labels affixed to containers of corrosive chemicals and products. Obviously, getting something corrosive onto your skin could cause a chemical burn, and the same could be said if you get any into your eye. But these products can also be corrosive to metals, which means they could corrode containers and other articles made from metal, causing them to break or leak. The skull and crossbone pictogram identify chemicals and products that present an acute toxicity hazard. The toxic effects of overexposure to these poisonous products could even be fatal in the right doses. Acute means the effects happen relatively quick as opposed to over a long period of time, which leads us to our next pictogram. The health hazard pictogram identifies toxic chemicals and products that can cause health problems over a long period of time, such as carcinogens, which can lead to cancer, mutagens, which can cause alterations in your DNA and affect your offspring, reproductive hazards, which could affect the ability of men and women to have healthy children, respiratory sensitizers, which could cause you to have an allergic reaction when exposed to that chemical at even low levels after you have had an initial overexposure. Chemicals that can cause damage to or affect the function of certain organs, and aspiration toxicity hazards, which could lead to the development of chemical pneumonia. A very broad category of chemicals and products are identified by the next pictogram, which is an exclamation mark. This symbol is associated with several products and chemicals that, relatively speaking, represent lesser levels of health hazard, but still require you to take precautions. For example, many chemicals and products are considered an irritant to your skin or to your eyes, while others can have a similar effect on your respiratory tract when they are inhaled. This icon also covers chemicals that could cause you to have an allergic skin reaction after subsequent exposures, and some of these chemicals could have an acute effect on your health that, while less severe than those identified by the skull and crossbones pictogram, still require you to utilize precautions so you don't suffer any ill effects. Chemicals that have a narcotic effect on your central nervous system are also categorized in the exclamation mark group, as are any products that have a harmful effect on the ozone layer, although OSHA does not enforce the use of this pictogram for ozone damage because it does not directly affect the health of workers. And finally, this last pictogram appears on labels of chemicals and products that are considered toxic to plants and aquatic animals. However, while this pictogram may be required by other agencies to appear on container labels, OSHA does not enforce the use of this pictogram since it will not directly affect the health and safety of exposed workers. As previously mentioned, at least one, but in many cases 2, 3, or even more of these pictograms will appear on the labels of containers of chemicals and products covered by the OSHA Hazard Communication Standard, as well as on safety data sheets. So read them and heed them, as you will need to be aware of the hazards posed by the various products you use at work. Also, keep in mind that pictograms are not intended to replace all other hazard identification symbols, as some of those are required by other government agencies, such as the Department of Transportation or Environmental Protection Agency, so you may continue to see them on containers along with pictograms. And in addition to containers of chemicals and products that we purchase from vendors, employers will need to make sure that all in-house labeling systems incorporate the required information by the deadlines established by OSHA. Speaking of deadlines, here is an overview of some very important dates. The revised Hazard Communication Standard, which requires the use of GHS-compliant labels on containers, was published on March 24th of 2012, and OSHA is giving manufacturers and distributors of hazardous chemicals and products until June 1st of 2015 to make sure all containers display the updated labels. However, many manufacturers and distributors are already starting to use compliant labels on their containers, or will be doing so long before the due date. So OSHA requires employers to get a head start and begin training all of their workers on how to read and understand those labels, and they have until December 1st of 2013 to get that training done. On a related note, employers must also update their written hazard communication programs by June 1st of 2016 to reflect the changes brought about by the adoption of the GHS system of labeling and hazard classification. So in review, the revised OSHA Hazard Communication Standard requires GHS compliant labels to appear on all containers of hazardous chemicals and products. Those labels are standardized in the information that must appear including the display of all applicable pictograms, which are visual icons that identify the various classifications of hazards associated with the products. And employers must provide training to all affected workers so they understand the information that appears on those labels. If you have any questions about the GHS labeling system or about the hazards of the product you work with, contact your employer safety representative or feel free to contact the safety professionals at OSHA Training Services. In 1983, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, published their Hazard Communication Standard. This important standard was often referred to as the Employee Right to Know Standard because it was developed to ensure that workers had access to information and training about the hazards of the chemicals and products they were exposed to at work. One of the major requirements of OSHA's HAZCOM standard was for manufacturers and distributors of hazardous products to develop and make available material safety data sheets for their products. But while the OSHA standard mandated very specific health and safety information about the products be provided on the material safety data sheets, HAZCOM was a performance-based standard, meaning there was no specific format that had to be utilized by the manufacturers and distributors when developing their MSDS, nor were there any standardized hazard ratings or precautions. As a result, MSDSs took on all shapes and forms, in part because manufacturers and distributors used different formats as they prepared these documents. As you can imagine, that led to a lot of frustration among workers. Eventually, it was determined that the OSHA HAZCOM standard, as written, was not meeting its original intent, which was to help employees know exactly what they were working with, how it could harm them, and most importantly, how to protect themselves. So, in 2012, OSHA revised their hazard communication standard and did away with the requirements for material safety data sheets. Now, manufacturers and distributors of hazardous chemicals and products will have to start providing a new informational document called a Safety Data Sheet, or SDS. While the information contained on new safety data sheets is very similar to that appearing on the old MSDSs, the information will now have to follow a specific format and order. There is also a standardized hazard classification system that must be utilized on all SDSs to convey information about the physical and health-related hazards associated with that product, and the revised HAZCOM standard now requires that employers train their employees on how to read and understand the new GHS Safety Data Sheet format. So the standard changed from Employee Right to Know to Employee Right to Understand. As part of the revision to their HAZCOM standard, OSHA adopted the GHS formatting requirements for safety data sheets. GHS stands for the Globally Harmonized System of Classification and Labeling of Chemicals. The GHS is a standardized system, meaning there will be consistency in the information appearing in safety data sheets. This system was developed by the United Nations, which means that, once fully adopted and implemented, safety data sheets for products from around the world will be prepared in a standardized format which is important in our global economy. In the new format, all safety data sheets will be broken down into 16 separate sections. The sections will always have the same titles and will always appear in the same order. Now let's take a look at the information that must appear on GHS compliant safety data sheets, starting with Section 1. Section 1 on safety data sheets is titled Identification. This is where you will find the name of the product as it appears on the container label, and in some cases applicable synonyms or chemical classification codes used for the product. You will also find supplier information, including the name of the manufacturer or distributor of the product, their address, and emergency contact number. And on some safety data sheets you may see supplemental information about the product, such as the intended use for the product, directions for its use, and possibly an expiration date. All this information must match that appearing on the container label. The second section of a safety data sheet is titled Hazard Identification. Here you will find the GHS hazard classifications for the product, including those for each health hazard and physical hazard, and their individual ratings in applicable hazard categories. You will also find the appropriate signal word associated with the product. There are only 2 signal words that are used in the GHS system, either the word danger, which indicates a relatively severe or immediate hazard, or warning, which indicates a less severe but still potentially harmful level of hazard. This section will also display one or several hazard statements. Statements such as these 2 examples give employees a quick warning about what hazards are associated with the product and differ according to the classification and categories of hazards presented by the product. Section 2 of the safety data sheet also displays applicable precautionary statements. These are also standardized in the GHS system and in general convey information about how to prevent or lessen exposure to the hazards of a product. And something fairly new to us here in the United States are pictograms. Pictograms are standardized icons that let workers quickly identify the types of hazards associated with the product. There are 8 different pictograms for the health and safety hazards covered in the GHS system. A more detailed explanation of hazard statements, precautionary statements, and pictograms is provided on our online tutorial titled GHS Labeling Requirements, which is also available for free on our website. And last but not least, information about any unclassified hazards that are not covered in the GHS system, such as combustible dust, will be provided in this section. Section 3 of Safety Data Sheets, titled Composition and Information on Ingredients, identifies chemicals contained in the product. This could be a single ingredient for a pure substance, or 2 or more ingredients if the product is a mixture or contains impurities or stabilizers that contribute to the hazards of a product. You will also find the common name and any synonyms that may be used for the product, as well as the applicable Chemical Abstracts Services or CAS number. When the product is a mixture of hazardous chemicals, the safety data sheet will also list the concentration of all ingredients which are classified as hazards, expressed in either percentages or ranges by weight. And for chemicals where a trade secret is claimed, there will be a statement that the specific chemical identity and or its composition have been withheld as a trade secret. Section 4 on a safety data sheet describes the initial first aid measures that should be administered by responders to anyone who has experienced a chemical exposure. This information includes a list of aid for different routes of exposure, such as contact with eyes or skin, inhalation, or ingestion. Also included will be a description of the most common symptoms of overexposure, including those which are acute or delayed, and recommendations for immediate medical care and special treatment that may be needed in some severe cases. Section 5 provides the manufacturer's recommendations for fighting a fire that involves their product. Here you will find a recommendation for the most suitable type of equipment for extinguishing a fire involving the product, as well as information about extinguishers that are not appropriate for use. You will also find details about specific hazards that may develop when the product is involved in a fire, as well as hazardous byproducts that may be generated during the combustion of the chemical. And in some cases, you may see recommendations for special protective equipment or precautions to be utilized by fire brigades or firefighters. Section 6 of the safety data sheet provides the manufacturer's recommendations for responding to spills, leaks, or accidental releases of their product. This could include response measures for containment and cleanup methods to be used to prevent or minimize exposure for response personnel. This may include specific recommendations for protecting personnel involved in the response from specific hazards, such as sources of ignition or lack of ventilation, recommended personal protective equipment to prevent personnel from being contaminated during the response, and emergency procedures, including instructions for evacuation of response personnel when needed, as well as others located nearby. Section 7 will provide information pertinent to safe handling and conditions for safe storage of the product. The required information consists of precautions for safe handling to prevent or minimize the release of the chemical into the environment, to prevent exposure or contamination for personnel handling the product, and recommended hygiene practices, for example, prohibitions against smoking, eating, or drinking in or near areas where the product is being handled. And when the product is being stored, there may be a need to avoid certain incompatible materials or agents such as high heat or water that might cause the product to react. Section 8 of the safety data sheet, titled Exposure Controls and Personal Protection, lists the OSHA permissible exposure limits, or PELs, for the chemical or chemicals contained in the product. These mandatory limits dictate when it will be necessary to utilize controls such as ventilation systems or respiratory protection devices to protect workers from the ill effects of overexposure to the chemical. There may also be listings for voluntary threshold limit values, or TLVs, established by the American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygienists, or similar limits recommended by other groups. This section will also list appropriate engineering controls, where applicable, such as recommendations for exhaust ventilation systems or enclosures to contain emissions. And, of utmost importance, you will find the manufacturer's recommendations for personal protective equipment, or PPE, including any special requirements for providing certain types of PPE, such as respirators, goggles, or gloves. Section 9 of the safety data sheet identifies all applicable physical and chemical properties associated with the product. While most workers may not care about this type of information, safety managers and engineers may have a need to know about specific information on the product, including but not limited to: what does it smell like? What does it look like? At what temperature does the product freeze or boil? They may also need to know at what temperature the product emits enough vapors to catch on fire or cause an explosion. How much vapor must be present at the point of ignition to burn or cause an explosion, and are the vapors heavier than air or lighter? And when dealing with corrosive products, it may be necessary to know the pH of the chemical. Section 10 of a safety data sheet is titled Stability and Reactivity. Here you will find important information identifying any other materials which may be incompatible with the product, as well as any conditions to avoid during storage or handling, such as temperature extremes, shock, and static discharge. There will also be information about any conditions that could cause the chemical to react or polymerize, as this could cause the product to release excessive pressure or heat, or create decomposition products that could be harmful to exposed workers. And when applicable, this section will also provide information about stabilizers that may be needed to maintain stability of the product. Section 11, titled Toxicological Information, lists the known routes of exposure the chemical can use to get into your system, including inhalation, ingestion, and skin and eye contact. Also listed are the effects of exposure to the product, which include acute and chronic effects, applicable target organ effects, and a description of symptoms associated with overexposure to the product. There will also be specific measures of toxicity where applicable, such as LD50. That is the estimated amount of a substance expected to kill half of exposed test animals in a single dose. And if a chemical is listed as an actual or potential carcinogen, that information will be provided in this section too. Section 12, Ecological Information. Section 13, Disposal Considerations. Section 14, Transportation Information, and Section 15, Regulatory Information, all deal with requirements regulated by other entities such as the Environmental Protection Agency or the Department of Transportation. Therefore, these sections are not regulated by OSHA, but appear in the safety data sheet to be consistent with the GHS format. And finally, Section 16 of Safety Data Sheets, titled Other Information, lists details such as the date the safety data sheet was prepared, if this is the original version issued or a revised version, and in some cases an overview of any changes that were made during the last revision. And in some cases, the manufacturer or distributor may choose to put other information about their product in this section, as well as any applicable disclaimers. Employers are responsible for gathering new safety data sheets for all hazardous chemicals and products to which their employees are exposed, and make sure they are readily accessible during each work shift to employees while they are in their work areas. And employers must provide training to their workers regarding the new safety data sheet format. All these things must be done by the deadlines established by OSHA in their revised hazard communication standard. Speaking of deadlines, here is an overview of some very important dates. The revised hazard communication standard, which requires the use of GHS compliant safety data sheets, was published on March 24, 2012. Manufacturers and distributors of hazardous chemicals and products have until June 1st of 2015 to begin distribution of the new safety data sheets. However, many of them have already started providing safety data sheets that meet the new format or will do so long before the due date. Therefore, OSHA requires employers to get a head start and begin training all their workers on how to read and understand the new safety data sheets, and they have until December 1st of 2013 to get that training complete. And on a related note, employers must also update their written hazard communication programs to reflect the changes brought about by the adoption of the GHS system of labeling and hazard classification. So in review, the revised OSHA Hazard Communication Standard, which has the goal of making sure employees understand what hazardous chemicals and products are in the workplace and how to work safely with and around those items, requires GHS compliant safety data sheets be developed and provided for all hazardous chemicals and products. These safety data sheets are standardized in format, will always be comprised of 16 sections that appear in the same order, and provide standardized warnings and precautions applicable to the product. Also, employers must provide training for affected workers so they can find and understand the information that appears on safety data sheets. If you have any questions about the GHS format for safety data sheets or about the hazards of any of the products you work with, contact your employer safety representative or feel free to contact the safety professionals at OSHA Training Services through our website.
Vehicle safety and maintenance.
Hi, I'm Dr. Bill Van Tassel, Manager of Driver Training Programs for AAA. We're talking about how to avoid distracted driving, and today we're going to put 3 regular drivers to the test, asking them to text and drive on a closed course. This is our closed driving course. AAA has set up a route lined with traffic cones. I'll be in the passenger seat, and we will ask each driver to read and send text messages while navigating the course. Each driver will be scored on how well they do. Okay, text, where are you? Where are you? And just between this set of cones here. Text, what's for dinner? What's for dinner? This way. Text, I'm running late. I'm running late. Okay, text, meet me at the movies. Meet me at the movies. Okay, text, pizza tonight. Pizza tonight. All right, text, who's your friend? Who's your friend? As you can see, these regular drivers had trouble driving while texting. They could not keep the car in their lane, they drove in a jerky manner, and their speed varied quite a bit. Their text messages weren't very accurate either. Let's see what the drivers thought of the challenge.
Driving the course today was more difficult than I imagined. I really felt I was going to be able to do it just fine, and coming in here I ended up knocking down lots of cones, and I found actually setting the text while taking the turns to be very difficult.
I knew there were a lot of risks with distracted driving, especially texting, since you need to take your eyes off the road. I don't feel that I will text and drive going forward because it's way too dangerous.
My friends should know that texting and driving, it seems easy, but when you're really trying to pay attention to the road and the text, it's difficult. I don't think I'll be texting and driving in the future.
What you've seen drivers attempt here today is an oversimplification of much more complicated behaviors that are occurring on our highways every day. We hope that after looking at texting and driving from a new, outside perspective, you'll be convinced not to try it yourself. Remember that distracted driving, no matter what the distraction, is a hazard for all motorists. When you're behind the wheel, driving safely is the most important thing you should be concentrating on. With common sense and a little planning, you'll find that avoiding distraction is not as great a challenge as it may seem. And at the end of the day, it's just not worth the risk. Thank you, and we'll see you on the road. Severe winter weather can be both frightening and dangerous when driving. That's why it's so important to know the safety rules for dealing with winter road emergencies. Here's what you need to know to stay cautious in adverse weather and prepare for winter driving. Keep your vehicle in peak operating condition and have it inspected before winter hits in full force. Pack a cell phone, blankets, gloves, hats, food, water, and any needed medication in your vehicle in case you get stranded out in the snow. Watch the weather reports and delay trips when especially bad weather is expected. If you must leave, let others know your route, destination, and estimated time of arrival. On the road, keep your gas tank at least half full to avoid gas line freeze-up. Never use cruise control when driving on any slippery surface. Always look and steer where you want to go on wet roads. When driving in snow, be sure to accelerate and decelerate slowly to help maintain traction and avoid skids. plan your maneuvers well in advance and do one thing at a time. Brake, then turn, then accelerate, and keep your speed way down. Remember, it takes longer to slow down on icy roads. Nothing happens as quickly as on dry pavement. Don't stop if you can avoid it. Instead, slow your speed and keep your car moving. This can help prevent you from becoming stuck. When you do slow down, keep the heel of your foot on the floor and use the ball of your foot to brake very gently, squeezing the pedal slowly. If you don't have somewhere you have to be, stay home. Even if you can drive well in the snow, not everyone else can. So drive cautiously, take it slow, and stay alert to stay alive this winter. Spring and summer showers may mean flowers, but wet pavement contributes to over 1 million traffic crashes each year. Here are some tips you'll want to follow next time you're caught driving in the rain. Safety starts before you drive, and your goals should be to see and be seen. Replace windshield wiper inserts that leave streaks or don't clear the glass in a single swipe. Make sure all headlights, taillights, brake lights, and turn signals are properly functioning so that other drivers will see you during downpours. Also, turn on your headlights whenever you drive. You'll be that much more visible. Proper tire tread depth and inflation are imperative to maintaining good traction on wet roadways. Check your tire tread depth with a quarter inserted upside down into the tire groove. If you can see above Washington's head, start shopping for new tires. Check each tire's pressure, including the spare, at least once a month, and be sure to check the pressures when the tires are cold. Overall, you want to be extra cautious in wet weather. Slow down, avoid hard braking or turning sharply, and allow ample stopping distance between you and the cars in front of you. Also, do these things one at a time. Brake, then turn, then accelerate. And if you feel the car begin to skid, continue to look and steer in the direction you want the car to go. Don't panic and avoid slamming on the brakes to maintain maximum control. Follow these simple wet weather driving tips and stay safe in the rain.
Delaying auto repairs can be a dangerous gamble for motorists. While auto repair can be expensive and time-consuming, a breakdown is a real possibility if needed service is ignored. Disregarding auto repair can lead to the following examples of a dangerous auto failure. A loss of traction due to worn or bald tires can cause the driver to lose both braking power and steering control. Worn tires are more likely to hydroplane on wet pavement and skid on snow or ice. Check tire tread depth regularly and invest in new tires before excessively worn ones compromise driving safety. Worn suspension components and poor wheel alignment can contribute to a loss of control during sudden turns or high-speed driving. Tires, wheels, suspension arms, anti-roll bars, springs, shock absorbers, and struts all work together to keep your vehicle traveling in the direction they're steered with minimal pitch and body roll. Brake failure and fading can be caused by old brake fluid or low brake fluid levels. Water contamination of old brake fluid accelerates wear and corrosion of brake system components. And if heat generated during braking boils the fluid, it can lead to a partial or even full loss of braking power. Have brakes inspected annually or whenever the brake fluid in the reservoir reaches the level marked low. Obscured vision caused by worn, cracked, or rigid wiper blades that can't adequately remove rain and grime can cause collisions. Streaking and chattering are common signs it's time to replace wiper blades. Rubber blades typically last about 6 to 12 months depending on the climate, so replace them when they no longer clear the glass with a single swipe. Delaying any of this simple maintenance can lead to dangerous driving situations and possibly a collision. Be proactive and have your vehicle serviced regularly for a safer drive. Hi, I'm John Nielsen with AAA's Approved Auto Repair. We're all concerned about saving fuel and protecting the environment. There's a number of easy tips that you can use every day to help get the most out of a gallon of gas and protect the environment while you're at it. The good news is there's several tips that everybody can do to make those changes. Simple things like properly maintaining our car, keeping the tires properly inflated, it can make a huge difference. Next is simply change the way we drive by slowing down a little bit, by accelerating a little bit more slowly, can really improve the fuel economy of our vehicles with no extra cost. Also planning your trip, making sure that we route properly, that we don't run unnecessary distance can make a big difference in fuel economy. And then last, just getting some of the weight out of the car can make a difference. When you put all these things together, you really can save money at the pump and also do good things for the environment. Hi, I'm John Nielsen with AAA's Approved Auto Repair. We're all concerned about saving gas, and one of the biggest factors is you. By changing the way we drive, we can get more miles out of a gallon of gas, and it can be as simple as changing the way we accelerate. A great example is if you pretend there's an egg between your foot and the gas pedal as you accelerate. You want to accelerate and brake in a manner that you don't crush the egg. Easing on the gas, easing on the brakes are a great way to save fuel. One of the biggest factors in saving fuel is to simply slow down a little bit. For example, for every 5 miles an hour you go over 60 miles an hour, the average car is going to use another 24 cents per gallon of gas. That's like saving almost a quarter every time you fill up for every gallon you add. And most of us know that unnecessary idling is wasting fuel. We can think of that as 0 miles per gallon. So when you have the opportunity, perhaps anytime you're going to be idling for more than 30 seconds, simply turn the car off. It's going to save us a little bit of fuel. None of these tips will cost you a dime, and putting them all together can save you big at the gas pump. Hi, I'm John Nielsen with AAA's Approved Auto Repair. We're all concerned about saving fuel, and one of the great ways to do that is to properly maintain our vehicle. The first area we should take a look is our tires. Properly maintaining the air pressure in our tires can save gasoline and keep our car much safer. Now, one of the big misconceptions about tire pressure is where to find the right numbers. Well, looking on the sidewall of your tire is not right. The tire pressure listed on the sidewall of a tire gives you the maximum pressure. That's not where we want to run. We want to open our owner's manual, or we want to look right inside the driver's side door, and it will give us the exact pressure recommended by the manufacturer for our tires. Oftentimes you'll find that the front tires and the back tires have different air pressures listed, so make sure we fill them up. When we check our tires, we should check them when they're cold. It's important, and we should check them at least once a month. Another consideration for best fuel economy is to watch the warning lights on your dashboard. There are a number of lights that can tell you that there's something that needs to be done with your car, but maybe one of the largest is the service engine light or maintenance required light on the dashboard. When this light comes on, it's telling you that the computer in the vehicle senses a problem and is definitely using too much gas. In fact, simply a defective oxygen sensor can use up to 40% more fuel than a well-maintained vehicle. So if you see a warning light on your dash, get it into the repair shop as quickly as possible to get it repaired. And finally, maintaining your vehicle according to the manufacturer's recommendation is really important. Simply pull out your owner's manual. It'll give you the information you need to maintain your vehicle in the best manner and get the maximum fuel economy. Following these maintenance tips will help you get the most fuel economy out of your car. Hi, I'm John Nielsen with AAA's Approved Auto Repair. We're all concerned about saving fuel, and there's a lot of misconceptions about what will save fuel and what we can do to get the best fuel economy. The first one is using a higher grade of gasoline to get better fuel economy. The truth is that using the grade of gasoline that your car was designed to use is the best way to save some money at the pump. So look in your owner's manual and use the grade of gasoline that your manufacturer recommends, and that's your best way to save some money. The next is the difference between using the air conditioning and keeping our windows down. Many people think that keeping your windows down is the best way to go, and that might be a good idea around town. But on the highway, there's very little savings in keeping the windows down versus running the air conditioner. So when you consider your comfort, it might be a good idea to keep the windows up, keep the air conditioner on. It won't be a big difference in what we pay at the pump. And finally, a myth that really isn't a myth is that keeping extra weight out of the car can save fuel. Look through your car, look through the trunk, and take out those things that don't absolutely need to be there. Maybe a set of golf clubs, maybe some magazines, tools, whatever. Keep them out of the back, and we can pick up small increases in fuel economy. So keep these tips in mind to help save some money at the pump. Hi, I'm John Nielsen with AAA, and today we're here talking about buying and maintaining tires. In this segment, we're going to talk specifically about maintaining your tire, what you need to know about keeping your tire in good shape, getting maximum performance, maximum life, and protecting your investment. The first thing we should talk about is tire pressure. Keeping your tires properly inflated is critical to maintaining the life of the tire, to maximizing its fuel economy, and perhaps most importantly, to keeping you and the people riding in your car safe. Now, the tire has a pressure listed on the sidewall, but quite honestly, that's not the place that you want to check to see how to inflate your tires. You want to look in your owner's manual, or you want to look inside the door jamb of the driver's door, and there'll be a little placard that says inflate the tires to a certain pressure. Interestingly, tires in the front may have a different inflation pressure than tires in the rear. We want to make sure that we inflate the tire to the proper pressure when the tires are cold. That means before we drive it in the morning. As you drive your car, the tires will start to warm up and actually increase the pressure inside the tire as much as 2 to 3 pounds. So the best thing to do is to check your tire pressure before you leave in the morning. Remove the valve stem cap, use your tire pressure gauge, check the pressure and record it. If the tires are 2 pounds underinflated, when you go to fill up your tires, add 2 pounds. You'll notice that instead of being at 30 pounds, the tire may now be at 32 or 33. Add 2 pounds on top of that to make sure that you're at the right pressure, and then check it again the next morning. The next step that we want to do in maintaining our tires is to make sure that we properly rotate them. Now, tire rotation is best done every 6 months or 6,000 miles. This is something you can do at home, but really is a great time to take it to a shop, have them rotate your tires, and check your brakes and check other components on the car to make sure that all the safety pieces are in good shape, that it's not time to perform some other maintenance on your vehicle. Another area of maintenance on your tire would be tire alignment. Now, alignment is something that we should be doing at least once a year, but in many areas of the country where roads are damaged by frost and we have potholes, it may be necessary to align your car more than once a year. If you find your car pulling to the left or the right or having a shimmy or shake, it's a great time to have it inspected for alignment and tire balance. Now, as we're maintaining our tires, we can take a look at the tire itself and tell a lot about what's going on. As you can see in this graphic, tires will wear differently depending on conditions that exist on the vehicle. The tire labeled number 1 wears on the inside of the tire and would indicate a problem with alignment. Tire number 2 wears on the inside and outside of the tire, would indicate problems with tire inflation. Tire 6 would indicate a shifted belt or damaged tire. 8 demonstrates the wear bars that are built into every tire that actually shows you when it's wearing out. And finally, we have tire appearance. While not critical to tire safety, it is something that we're concerned about to keep our vehicle looking good, and simply washing the tire with soap and water, at the same time removing any brake dust from the wheels, and once the tire is clean, simply finish it with a product that limits UV damage to the outside of your tire. In the next segment, we'll talk about changing a flat tire. Hi, I'm John Nielsen with AAA's Approved Auto Repair, and maintaining the appearance of our car is a great way to have a cool ride and also protect our investment. Now, the first thing we're going to do is just give it a good bath, and to do that you want to have a lot of fresh water and some car cleaning soap. Spray your car down, get as much loose dirt, sand, road salt off. The next step will be to clean it with a dedicated car wash soap, and this is really important because many normal household cleaners will actually remove the wax, and maybe the biggest offender is dishwashing soap. So get some dedicated car wash soap, follow the instructions on the bottle, mix it properly, take a car wash mitt and wash off all the dirt from the car. Take your time, get the exterior well, make sure that you get in the crooks and crannies and get any excess dirt off. The next, we're going to rinse it good, and it's important to make sure that we get all the old soap off the outside of our car. So take your time, make sure you get it out. Don't forget the door jambs, don't forget the fuel tank filler. Make sure that you rinse that well. Next, it's important to dry our car so we don't get water spots. And to do that, the best tool made is a chamois. The old-fashioned natural skin chamois work great, and you want to get this wet, wring it out well, and dry off your vehicle. And it really is important to get all the water off. Now, when we're done with that, there are a couple of things that we might want to consider depending on what condition our paint's in. The first is something called a clay bar. And this is a product that actually has a very, very mild abrasive in it. And if you go over your car with a clay bar, it will actually remove things like rail dust, like contaminants from the environment, and can turn a car that looks nice into a great looking car. When you go to the store to purchase your cleaning supplies, you'll see polishes on the shelf. Now, polishes are often used in older paint jobs, but today's cars use a clear coat paint that can be damaged by an aggressive polish. So it's a good idea to take a look at anything you're going to buy to polish your car and make sure that it says clear coat safe. If you put all these tips together, you can keep the outside of your car looking good and really protect your investment for the long run. Hi, I'm John Nielsen with AAA's Approved Auto Repair, and maintaining the appearance of our car is a great way to protect our investment. The interior of our car is where we spend most of our time. There are several things that we should know to keep that area looking good and prevent long-term damage. So let's start with the basics. Simply keeping it vacuumed, keeping it clean is important, and it's something we should do at least weekly. By keeping sand and dirt and salt out of the carpet fibers, the carpet is going to look good for a longer period of time. We also want to make sure that any stains that might show up on the carpet get cleaned up quickly. One of the best products to use is a carpet cleaner. A number of household cleaners may remove the stain, but it also could cause long-term damage to the carpet. So as we move up the car, let's talk about upholstery next. Now, depending on what type of upholstery we have, we'll need to use specific cleaners for that. If we have cloth seats, we want to make sure that we use a cleaner that's specifically designated for upholstery. Anything else can actually damage the fibers or create new stains. If we're dealing with vinyl, they'll usually wipe down pretty easily with a simple household soap. One important part of vinyl seats that some people have found out the hard way is we don't want to put protectant on those seats because it makes them so slick, you actually start sliding around in the car when you turn a corner. Finally, with leather, there's a couple of things that are important. We really want to keep it clean, and to do that, we want to use a designated leather cleaner or saddle soap. Once it's clean, we want to make sure that we put a conditioner on it. And this isn't a regular protectant, this is a conditioner that helps keep the leather soft. You may not notice a difference each time you do it, but over the life of the vehicle, it'll keep that leather from cracking and looking old. It's a great tip and something that we should get in the habit of doing with leather at least once a week. The last area to talk about is the hard surfaces. This can be the dashboard, this can be anything that's really made of plastic or some plastic-like material in the car. And the first tip is when it comes to cleaning these materials, we want to use the least harsh cleaner that we possibly can. Many household cleaners can actually cause damage inside the car, so make sure that you're using a cleaner that's designed specifically for vinyl. And once we have that clean, we want to make sure that we protect it. And it's the rays from the sun that actually start to deteriorate most of the plastic surfaces in the car. So when you purchase a protectant, you want to make sure that it has the UV inhibitor, and you also want to look for something that has a low gloss or low sheen. Oftentimes, putting a high gloss protectant on the dash or other surfaces in your line of sight can actually become distracting with the sun under some conditions. The next thing we want to be careful of is not to protect some surfaces like the steering wheel, the brake pedal, and the gas pedal, because they often become slippery and become difficult to hold on to. Now, these are just the basics. You can go crazy inside the car with crevice tools and special pieces to clean intricate nooks and crannies. But the important part is to maintain the inside of your car, keep the dirt out of the carpet, keep any stains off of any of the surfaces, and protect those surfaces so they don't prematurely age. If you put all these together, you really can protect your investment in the long run. Hi, I'm John Nielsen with AAA's Approved Auto Repair. Maintaining the fluids in our vehicle's engine is an important way to protect our investment and keep it reliable for the long term. Now, one of the first things that we think about is how to properly maintain the oil. And there are several tips that we'll go through, but we're going to start with simply how often do we check the oil in the engine. The engine oil should be checked at least once a month, and this is done by popping the hood and pulling the oil dipstick out, cleaning it, reinserting it back into the engine, removing it, and reading the level. It's really not very complicated, and if you can't find the engine oil dipstick, you can look in your owner's manual and it'll point it out to you. And while you're in there, the owner's manual will tell you how often you should change your oil. Now that's changed a lot in the last few years. It was once common to change our oil every 3,000 miles, but modern engines have recommended change intervals that go anywhere from 5,000 to 7,500 miles or maybe even more. In fact, some engines today don't even make recommendations based on mileage, but rather use engine computers to determine how you've driven and under what environments to recommend the best maintenance interval for long engine life. So now that we know how often to check and change our oil, the next thing to consider is what oil we're going to use when we do change it. Now, there are a number of things to consider, and the first is going to be the oil weight. This is usually represented by two numbers separated by a W. Once again, look in your owner's manual and look for the number that'll be 0W20, 5W30, 10W40. It will be a number like that, and it's important to use the manufacturer's recommended engine oil weight because using an oil that's too heavy can reduce your fuel economy, or using an oil that's too light can provide too little engine protection. The next thing to consider is its classification or certification. Now typically, this is represented by an API letter designation. So you'll see an API starburst and two letters. The most modern oil is SG. There's a separate set of designations for diesel motors, but in recent years there's been a proliferation of proprietary engine oil designations and certifications. Perhaps the most recent is GM's requirement for the use of Dexos certified engine oil in all 2011 and newer model years. So when you look in your owner's manual, make sure you understand not only the weight, but the designation, and make sure the oil used in your engine meets those exact certifications. Failure to do that could impact the warranty of your engine. The next consideration is a pretty easy one, and that's going to be for the type of oil that we use in the engine. Now, we can use synthetic, semi-synthetic, or even a base stock oil. We've looked in the owner's manual a number of times, and it'll give us the exact recommendation that the manufacturer has for maintaining our engine. If it requires synthetic, that's something that you definitely should use. However, if your owner's manual recommends just a base oil, you're fine using that. Now, some people may want to use a semi-synthetic or a fully synthetic, but you'll get maximum life and good performance out of using just a base stock oil. So these are the things to consider when thinking about engine oil, and following these tips can help you protect your engine for the longest period of time. Hi, I'm John Nielsen with AAA's Approved Auto Repair, and maintaining the fluids in our vehicle's engine is imperative to protecting our investment in the long run. Now, brake fluid is something that we don't often think about, and the good news is that it's really pretty simple to select the right fluid for our car. There are three types available, that's DOT 3, 4, and 5. The good news is all we need to do is open our owner's manual and see what the manufacturer recommends. The DOT 3, 4, and 5 designations have been around for a long time, but we're seeing increasing use of DOT 4 and DOT 5, which is synthetic brake fluid, in use in everyday vehicles. The good news is the information's in your owner's manual. Checking it is easy by simply opening the hood and looking at the brake master cylinder, typically located on the driver's side of your engine compartment in the very back. There'll be a minimum and max line, and you want to top that off anytime the brake fluid falls below the minimum line. Now, it's important to note, if that falls frequently or you see it falling often, you want to take your car to a shop because that's a great indication that you have a leak in the brake system and can get it checked out quickly. And finally, we should consider how often we should change the brake fluid in our car. Now, this is something that's often not even recommended in the owner's manual, but really is important to maintaining your brake system in the most efficient manner, lasting the longest period of time. AAA would recommend that you change the brake fluid in your car or have it flushed every other year. Brake fluid actually absorbs moisture from the atmosphere, and that moisture can reduce its performance, allowing the brake fluid to boil under heavy braking, and can also allow corrosion within the braking system, which can result in costly repairs. So brake fluid's a pretty easy subject to discuss, but it really is important to the overall safety and performance of our vehicle. So maintaining it according to the manufacturer's recommendation is key to getting maximum performance over the life of your vehicle. Hi, I'm John Nielsen with AAA's Approved Auto Repair. And maintaining the fluids in our vehicle's engine is critical to protecting our investment in the long run. Now, automatic transmission fluid has gone through a number of changes in recent years. Gone are the days when there were simply two types of fluid on the market. Many of today's manufacturers use a proprietary automatic transmission fluid, and it really is imperative that you use the right fluid to get not only a good shift quality and a comfortable ride, but to protect the warranty in your transmission. So let's talk for a minute about how to check the automatic transmission fluid in our vehicle's transmission. Most cars use a dipstick, much like the oil dipstick, where you'll simply start the engine and with the engine running, remove the dipstick, clean it off, reinsert, pull it out to check the level. Make sure you do it on a level surface, and if the transmission fluid is low, it needs to be topped off with the fluid that's recommended in your owner's manual. Now, some cars don't even use a dipstick anymore, so checking that owner's manual is going to keep you from fumbling around under the hood of the car looking for something that doesn't exist. Now, on those transmissions that don't have a dipstick, there really is no way to check the automatic transmission fluid, and the manufacturer counts on you changing it at the proper interval. So how often should you change the automatic transmission fluid? Well, once again, that's in the owner's manual, and typically it's going to be sometime around 3 to 5 years, depending on the application and how you use your vehicle. Some trucks can be as often as 25,000 miles when towing heavy. But it really is important that you change the fluid according to the manufacturer's recommendations, that you change the filter when you change the fluid to keep your transmission operating properly, protect your investment for the long run, and oftentimes protect your warranty. Hi, I'm John Nielsen with AAA's Approved Auto Repair. And maintaining the fluids in our vehicle's engine is critical to protecting our investment in the long run. One of the fluids that we should consider is power steering fluid. Now, this is something that we shouldn't have to top up unless there's a leak, but using the right fluid is important. The key here is to open our owner's manual and look at the recommendations for our particular vehicle. For many years, automatic transmission fluid was used in power steering, and in fact, some cars have that today. But increasingly, there's manufacturer-specific recommendations for their power steering fluid. So it's important to look in the owner's manual and make sure that we're adding the right type of fluid. Many manufacturers do not list a recommended change interval for the power steering fluid. It's not unusual to see those that do go 5+ years. However, to maintain your system in best shape, it would be a good idea to exchange the power steering fluid every 5 years or 100,000 miles, really as a preventative to wear. Power steering fluid is something that's relatively easy to maintain, and keeping a close eye on it will allow you to maintain your car in top operating order. Hi, I'm John Nielsen with AAA's Approved Auto Repair. And maintaining the fluids in our vehicle's engine is important to protecting our investment in the long run. Now, a fluid that we need to consider is the engine coolant. And there's been a number of changes in recent years. There are 3 major types of engine coolant available today. There's organic, inorganic, and hybrid organic. Now, those terms are important, but most people refer to the type of antifreeze in their car based on the color. There's the old-fashioned green, then there's yellow and red, and a number of other colors in the marketplace today. These are really important to know the color because if you need to top off your antifreeze, you want to make sure that you're using the same type. So if your car comes with a green antifreeze, you want to make sure that that's what you're filling it or partially filling it with. If you mix the antifreezes, you run the risk of causing damage to your engine in a relatively short period of time. So now that we have an understanding of the basic types of coolant used in engines today, it's important to understand how to check it and when to service and maintain it. Let's consider for a moment how to check the coolant level in our engine. Gone are the days when we'd actually check it directly in the radiator. Today, we're actually going to look at the coolant reservoir. The coolant reservoir is usually in the front of the engine compartment, and it's going to have marks in there that tell you the minimum and maximum, in which case you want to make sure that the coolant level when the engine is cold is between those 2 lines. Now, it's important to note that with these coolant reservoirs, that many of them are pressurized just like the old radiators were, and we cannot remove the cap when the engine's hot. It's always a great idea to look in your owner's manual to understand where to check it, and if it's a pressurized system, you want to make sure that you top off any fluids, check any fluids, only when the engine is cool. The final consideration is going to be engine coolant change intervals. Like we've said a number of times, this is something that we want to look in the owner's manual and get the manufacturer's recommendation. It can vary anywhere from 2 years to 5 years in length. When given a range, I would err on the short side. I usually change my engine coolant about every 2 to 3 years depending on the type of engine, the type of driving that I do. So engine coolant is really an important fluid to consider in maintaining the overall life of your engine. These tips are going to help you make the best choices and protect your investment for the long run.
Think safety. Your thoughts become your words. Talk about safety. Your words become your actions. Teach safety. Your actions become your habits. Work safely. Your habits become your character. Live safely. Your character becomes your destiny.